Welcome to See Beneath Your Beautiful, where guests share stories of adversity and perseverance, which inspire, encourage, and challenge us. We embrace these tough conversations, intimately exploring our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness.
My name is Marci Warhaft, and I have been a body image expert since 2007. And I am also the author of the book, The Memoir, The Good Stripper, a soccer mom's memoir of lies, loss, and lap dances, in which I talk about how a multitude of traumas led me into a double life, which led me into shame, which then led me to release all my secrets, reclaim my life and my body, and start a whole new chapter.
You have to talk to somebody about the shame that you're carrying to be free of it. Do you think that's true?
Well, I think at least you have to acknowledge it yourself and forgive yourself.
Yeah.
That was the missing puzzle for me, because there was no way that I could share my story completely with anyone until I was okay with it, because I was still punishing myself for the mistakes I made when I was just trying to survive. And so it wasn't until I looked at it differently and went, oh, wait, no, I understand why I did the things I did, why I felt the way I felt, why I thought the way I thought. And so once I was able to forgive myself for that and really show myself compassion, then it didn't matter what other people thought. Then it was easy to share, because it didn't matter if people didn't like me, didn't respect me, because I liked me for the first time in my life. I respected me. Mm-hmm. And there's so much more power in that than people realize.
I remember sitting in my car. I was a single mom. I was struggling. I did a lot of stupid things with men, trying to survive and looking for love in all the wrong places. And mm-hmm. I remember sitting in my car and saying to my sister, I was crying in my car. My kids were in the house. And I was just saying, God will never forgive me. I felt so much shame that even God couldn't forgive my sins. And she just said, there's nothing to forgive you for. It was such a beautiful moment, because I could feel like whatever it was, God's love wash over me and feel like I have nothing to be ashamed about. Like you said, there was reasons I did everything. And I was just a girl trying to do the best she could. And I forgave myself in that moment.
Well, absolutely. That's why my book, I actually dedicate it to anyone who's struggling to forgive themselves for the mistakes they made when they were just trying to survive. Because I think a big problem is that what we all do is we judge ourselves then on who we are now. And you can't do that. To look back things now, of course not, but I have insight and I have growth. To expect the younger me, the more vulnerable me, to have behaved the way I would now, that's completely unfair. I think, again, it's to show ourselves compassion instead of being so hard on ourselves. And that really does change everything moving forward.
I think I just read a quote by Elizabeth Gilbert that said her 50-year-old self was talking to her younger self. And she said, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you, but I hadn't met you yet.
That's so great.
Even 5 years ago, I'm not that woman. 10 years ago, for sure.
Months ago, 6 months ago. Did you remember?
I love that there's growth and there's change. I think that's just the most wonderful thing that happens to us. Tell me more about your book. What was the name of your book? From stripper to what?
You got the one word right. It's The Good Stripper, a soccer mom's memoir of lies, loss, and lap dances. And it's actually not a stripper story. I did do that, but I did it for a few months. It wasn't huge, but that was part of this double life that I led for years. In a nutshell, I grew up this kid who was very loved and supported, and I felt like I could do anything. I was very confident. I was very outspoken. I wrote a petition about my grade 3 teacher because I didn't think he was very nice, and got him to apologize to me and my parents. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great, because my mother had taught me very young that I have a voice and a right to use it. I always stood up for what I believed in. I wasn't intimidated by anyone. I was a little dancer and a little performer. I had a ton of confidence at that time. And then life started just systematically tearing me down. My parents got divorced when I was 10, and my father left. And at the time, I don't consider it one of the big tragedies in my life. It was hard, very hard. He left. My mother had 3 kids to take care of on her own, no support. And I was the first kid in my elementary school whose parents got divorced, so no one really knew what to do with me. And it was 1980. I'm the youngest of 3, and my older sister and I weren't super close, but I had an older brother, 5 years older, incredibly close. And my mother was spectacular. She was like love personified. So things were good. And then when I was 17 is when my life changed. And my brother got sick and he passed away. And I was completely unprepared for it, completely unprepared.
I'm sorry.
To this day, I mean, this was 1987 and he's still the screensaver on my phone. I mean, he was such a huge part of my life. And the reason why I think it devastated me so much was a few things. I mean, one, to me, he was always really healthy and just this amazing, amazing person. So it shattered that facade you have when you're a teenager and you think nothing bad will happen. You're supposed to feel invincible at that age. And now it was like, I mean, I didn't know anyone who had lost a sibling. I didn't know anyone who lost a parent. I mean,
how old was he?
I was 17 and he was 21. I maybe had a single friend who had lost a grandparent. Like, again, nobody knew what to do with me. Mm-hmm. And there was nowhere sort of for me to go with that. And so I felt like the world was incredibly unsafe. The moment before I heard he died was the last moment I ever felt truly safe in the world. And the other thing was that I felt like he was such a good person that it should have been me instead. I just felt that the world needed him more than me. Mm-hmm. And so even though my mom was amazing and she'd say, no, but what would I do without my Marci? You know, she was great like that. I still felt like, okay, if I'm going to be here, I have to earn my spot. Like I can't just be regular. All that confidence that I had as this little girl, all of a sudden I felt it's not enough. I'm not funny enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not interesting enough. So I thought, okay, you know, at 17 years old in the 80s, not that it's different now, but I thought, okay, maybe I'll be pretty enough. And that meant skinny enough. And so Billy's death gave birth to an eating disorder. And, you know, I remember going to him when I was a teenager and I'd never had a weight issue. And I remember saying to him, should I lose weight? Like just when you're 15. And he'd be like, no, you're beautiful. You're perfect. But it was my way of like taking some control over a life that felt completely out of control. Mm-hmm. I started really obsessing about my food. And then I had a doctor at the time who was really messed up and really also berated me and kind of set me in motion with the eating disorder as well. But here's the thing. So to go from having so much self-confidence to feeling pretty worthless, it leaves you very vulnerable to the rest of the world. And unfortunately, what came next wasn't easy. It was things like really soon after my brother died, my stepfather was arrested for bank robbery. He was living a double life. And then my mother got cancer. And then she was okay. But then I moved and I got married and that was fine. But then I got pregnant, lost a bunch of pregnancies. And it was just one kind of tragedy and trauma after another. Mm-hmm. And then I got pregnant again. And I was living on the other side of the country from my mom. And we would speak 3 times a day. And she didn't tell me her cancer had come back. And she died while I was pregnant. And I mean, it was just, I didn't get a minute as a mom with my mom and raising this baby. And then I got sick and ended up in the hospital for 2 months with a 25% chance of survival and had to fight my way back. And so I was dealing with a lot of physical trauma plus emotional trauma. And I didn't get a chance to catch my breath between each blow that life gave to me.
Yeah.
And then what had happened was my marriage took a turn. So at this point, I'd lost my mother, I'd lost my brother. I had lost 3 pregnancies.
How old are you now?
31.
Okay.
And I had given birth to my second son. And I got out of the hospital after 2 months. It was April 2000 and my younger son was born September 2001. So again, not a lot of time. And again, I had kidney failure, respiratory failure. I had a lot of recovery to do. And then my marriage took a turn. And my husband, and I get into detail with this in the book, let's just say that he decided that he wanted to change the dynamic of our marriage and open it up and share me. And it was not something, I was still battling an eating disorder. Yeah. I had just had a baby. It wasn't what I needed at that time. Mm-hmm. I've always been a sexual person. It wasn't that we were lacking anything. I think it was just something he was interested in. And he'd pushed for it before and I said no. And he brought it up again. And I think I was just done. I had a therapist refer to it as traumatic overload. It was just too much. And so I thought, well, the people who loved me are gone. My mother's gone, my brother's gone. So if I can't be loved, then maybe I could be desired. And so I agreed. And the first thing he wanted was for me to be with a friend of his. And he picked a friend he knew I didn't like, so it wouldn't be a threat to him. And that just kind of solidified it for me that, okay, I have 2 purposes: to be the best mother I can be and to be just an object. and to seek my worth that way. Because again, I still felt like I didn't deserve to be here, right? I still felt that it should have been my brother that was still here. So it was so important to me to be the best mother to my kids because I had lost the best mother and I adored my children. And also, here's the thing, losing my family so young. I mean, my brother was 21. My mother was 56. I almost died at 29. And so I felt like I don't know how much time I have. So I need to make every second with them count. So I need them to know every second that they're loved. I mean, my thing to this day is when I say I love you, I prefer for them to say, I know that I love you too, because it's just so important for me that they know. But then for me, well, I needed to find my value somewhere else and my worth somewhere else. So at least if people could want me, well, maybe that's something.
I totally understand that.
Again, I'm still dealing with the eating disorder. So I was feeling in some ways hyper focused on my body because I wasn't eating enough. I started bodybuilding. I belonged to 2 24-hour gyms. I worked out all the time.
Well, how come you belong to 2 of them?
Because one of them had the audacity to close at Christmas. And I think they closed maybe early on Sundays or something. So I needed always somewhere to go. I was the only one there at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm telling you. I made up a story like for people who were working there that I worked some kind of shift work because why, it was insane. It kind of spiraled out of control and we started doing things together. We went to swinging clubs and then we'd go to strip clubs. And then I felt like if I was going to be naked somewhere, I needed to, and I have this eating disorder. I really needed to be comfortable with my body. And I met a trainer who said he could get me looking at like a fitness model, but it cost money. And I was at home with 2 toddlers and I felt guilty taking money from the household to pay for something for myself if I wasn't making money. And so, okay, well, what kind of job can I do where I'm home all day with the kids and then can do something and they wouldn't know I was gone? And so that's when I started stripping. Then I would be home with the kids. I'd put them into bed. I'd go to the club. I'd dance. I was the only one who had a protein shake in my locker. I never had a sip of alcohol or any kind of drug.
But your husband knew and supported it, but your kids didn't know. The double life was about your kids never knowing.
Right.
Okay.
No one around us knew. And even my husband, he knew what was going on. He didn't know the details because what happened was I felt there was a lot of controlling going on. And so there was this rebellious part of me. The more he wanted to control, the more I wanted to say, oh, you think you can control me? I wish that little rebel in me would have said, no, this is unhealthy for me. This is going to stop. And either I left the situation or did something to end it. Instead, because of just where I was in my head, it was, I'll show you. And it was me putting myself more in danger. I went rogue. If a guy looked at me, you want to spend time with me? Okay. I mean, I would literally go days without sleeping. When I was dancing, I'd put the kids to bed. I'd go to the club. I'd come back, change, go to the 24-hour gym, stop at the 24-hour grocery store. Every 24-hour place in my neighborhood knew me. Come back, take a shower, get the kids up. And it was... I mean, it was like a few days I would do that. I mean, it's crazy that I wasn't on anything. I was hyper focused on my body while being very disconnected from it because I was hyper focused on it with food and how I looked. But then I was disconnected when I was being sexual. I confused being sexual with being sexualized. And that led me in some, pretty dark places and doing things that I didn't want to do. And I didn't feel supported. And that really destroyed me. Until I found my way out of it.
How did you find your way back to you? And then how do you help others who are struggling?
I kind of had to find myself a couple of times. So with that, to be very honest, the first time, it was probably the hardest chapter for me to write. I had this rude awakening where I knew I was hurting myself and I kind of felt I deserved it. So that was okay. And then I woke up to 3 emails one morning from 3 wives who didn't deserve it. And that was a big shame for me. I had never, ever, ever saw myself as a cheater or I didn't even think about it. And so when I realized I was hurting other people, that was devastating for me. And that was when I realized, okay, no, I can't do this anymore. And I remember going upstairs and telling my husband and his response was pretty awful.
What did he say?
What he said, well, here's the thing. So he knew I was doing stuff. And I think he never called me on it because he was afraid that if he said, you got to stop the extracurricular, then I'd say, okay, then we're stopping. And I think he didn't care enough about the extra that he would want to stop doing what we were doing. But this was awful. Like I remember calling my therapist up, leaving a bunch of messages because of course it was like 5 a.m. before the gym that I found the messages, and I just felt sick with myself. And I went up and I told him, so you'd expect either he'd be super angry, or what I thought more because of who he was, that he would be more of a scolding thing, like a parental thing. In fact, I got into bed and I was just sobbing, and he looked at me and he went, "What did you do?" I'm going to clean it up a bit. He just looked at me and he said, "Okay, if you let me have sex with you any way I want, I'll forgive you." And for me, that validated my thoughts that I'm nothing.
That your body is what you're worth.
That's it. Yeah. Awful. But I knew I needed to stop all the behavior. Again, I was seeing a therapist who said, stop it all. Don't go to clubs, don't go to strip clubs, like nothing. And that was really the start of it. So it started off pretty well because we stopped doing that. I kind of refocused. I refocused on my health. I went into an eating disorder treatment program for the first time in my life and got recovery from that, which was huge. Mm-hmm. I just started taking really better care of myself. And I felt better being more in control of myself. I felt better about myself. I saw what was happening with my kids at school with the messages they were getting about health and weight, and I didn't like it. And having come out of my eating disorder program, I felt compelled to do something about the negative messages that was going on in society. And I just kind of fell into being this eating disorder body image advocate. At the time, it was like right at the beginning of Facebook. So there weren't groups. There was no body positivity. There was nothing. And nobody wanted to talk about it but me. So I became the go-to for TV shows and radio programs talking about it, and wrote for Huffington Post and wrote a book for parents on body image. And that was my thing, created a program called Fit versus Fiction that I took to schools, starting with the first grade. And that was great. And that gave me sort of this new thing to be proud of. However, that lasted for a while. Problem is I never dealt with the shame of some of the stuff that I had done. And secrets, terrified that my kids would know I stripped, terrified that people would know that I slept with people who were in relationships, terrified of so much. I was afraid I would be on TV one day and then somebody would see me and you think all these things, call the radio station and be like, she's not such a good person. This is what she did. Or there was one day I was walking through the grocery store with my kids after I'd been into school, and this man walked through the aisle and he kind of looked at me funny. And one of my kids said, "Why is he looking at you that way?" And the truth is, maybe he thought he knew me. Maybe he was trying to flirt. But my thought was, did I have sex with him? Like, did he see me naked?
Right.
And I was terrified that he'd say something. And then living with that is so awful.
Yeah.
So awful that it's kind of set me back. And I couldn't do my workshops anymore because I couldn't help people be confident in who they are if I started to feel unworthy again. And my marriage wasn't great. We were focused on our children. We both were really focused on our children, which is great. But I felt very unloved. I had some more sort of physical health stuff thrown at me I had liver surgery. I had some major things happen that set me back again, and doing it really unsupported. And it took its toll on me again. And I kind of crashed and started feeling like maybe the world would be better off without me. Maybe even my kids would be better off without me. And I felt that way. I would drive for 2 years. I would drive my kids to school. And on the way to school, when they were teenagers, I tell myself consciously, okay, laugh at something on the way, sing to some song on the way, but don't let them see how sad you are. And then on the way back, when I dropped them off, I would pass the same underpass and think, ooh, if I turned my wheel just a little bit, would it hurt? Would it be fast?
I have said that to myself. When my kids were young and it was hard, I remember thinking that a number of times. It'd be so easy just to turn the wheel.
It starts off where I think I could never do that. I could never leave my children. Right. But then I started thinking, maybe they'd be better. It's a tough thing. And then what happened for me was I had this really interesting situation where I had dropped my kids off, and at this point, I was back into my eating disorder. I was binge eating. I was eating too much. And I stopped at the grocery store to pick up whatever I was going to eat, and then go home and watch whatever I was going to watch, and then cry, and then wash my face and get them. I was waiting at the checkout, and the woman was talking about something, and she said she was tired, and I said I was tired, and she's like, "No, she's like, you're always so bright and such a bright light." And I'm like, who was she talking? Like, for real? I didn't. She's like, yeah, you're luminescent. And I'm like thinking, I'm going home to binge and cry. Like, what is this? But she saw something in me that I thought was way gone. And it messed with me. I left there and I just sobbed when I got home. And I remember I had the worst headache, and I was like blaring my music and putting my groceries away. And something in that conversation or that connection, it made me think, okay, maybe I'm not done yet. Like, I felt done, but maybe there's something just like a flicker of something there. And I made that decision. I am going to change. And I remember I didn't cry again for like 6 months. Now I didn't immediately leave my husband or anything like that, but the wheels were in motion where something was going to change. Maybe a couple of years after that, I did leave. And that was about 6 years ago only. Still, so much has changed in the last 6 years, but it was me saying, this is not the life that I'm supposed to have. I don't know what's going to be, but I deserve better. I deserve to be healthy. I deserve to be happy. And the first step is to figure out who I am. I'd lost completely who I was. I remember my therapist said at the time, she goes, you're like a puddle of nothing. That's what I'd become. My kids would look at me funny and I'd cry. I could do no right. That's where things started to get better. Once you start telling your truth, one thing I hear all the time is that my honesty is refreshing. But there's something so freaking liberating about that. And I think when people see that, it gives them the hope that, oh, you know what? She told the truth and the world didn't end. Maybe at some point I can. And so what I do is I help people forgive themselves for the mistakes they made in the past. I think we hold on to a lot of shame and it's really hard to let that go. We're pretty forgiving with other people, but not with ourselves. I help people look at the stuff that they're still holding on to and then reframe it and understand it so that they can let it go and then move forward.
All the stuff you've been through and you're now in a place of empowerment. What's your message to other people?
Here's one thing I realized recently. Sometimes I hear, because I post dance videos or lip sync videos and I'm outspoken, people will be like, maybe you want to kind of tone it down because you don't want to lose maybe a job thing or some sort of opportunity, or maybe you'll turn the wrong people off. And I thought about it for about 45 seconds. And then I realized that if I lose out on a person, a job, an opportunity, because I'm not right for them, that's not the right opportunity for me.
Right.
But how much would it suck if I was being not fully me? If I lost out on something that would be perfect for me because I wasn't being fully who I am, that's so much worse.
Right. I love that.
I could have met this amazing person, had this amazing job because they wanted Marci, but I wasn't giving them Marci because I was afraid.
I love that.
I'm 52 and I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I keep changing my mind because life changes. We're allowed to try on different outfits as far as life goes and see what fits. And if it fits for a little while, great. And then if it doesn't, to change, who cares? Life is so challenging that when you can have fun with it, have fun with it. I mean, I'm literally the person who dances down the street. Somebody walked by me the other day. He was wearing purple scrubs. And he went, "You're the dancing lady." I'm like, I guess I am.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
I feel like I've cried enough tears in my life. So when I want to dance, I'm going to dance. If anyone has a problem with that, I think that they need to look at themselves and go, why does someone else's joy make me feel uncomfortable? Life is too short to not do the things you want to do. Live it, eat it, drink it, dance to it, sing to it, because it is hard. Whatever it is that gives you joy, do it and do it often.
I lost my mom in 1986 when I was 18 and she was just 46. And I feel like I've been living that way because of, what you're saying about your brother. And so I do know loss and I know that life is short and it can end at any minute. She died at 46 and her mother died at 46. But I'm almost 55. And just before my 52nd birthday, I got started in photography again. I liked it in high school and had let it go. In the last 3 years, I've very well known for my photography. I have this podcast and I just published a magazine. So it is definitely never too late. And you don't have to know what you are doing in life until it sparks in your head. And then you just go with it.
It's so funny when people say about it's too late or it's never too late. I find that so weird because it's as if we hit our prime at 20 or at 30. I had to grow into this person. Like it takes a half a century to grow into who we are. To me, it makes sense that we figure out this stuff later on. We had to grow into this physically, emotionally, intellectually, all of it. Of course, it's not too late. It's too early. You're allowed to change your mind.
I just read yesterday, somebody posted the first 50 years of childhood was really hard.
I love that. Oh, that's so good.
I don't know if it's 50 is a magic number, but 50 and 50 plus has been great. I really have enjoyed being a woman in her 50s.
I agree. I also had no issue turning 50. I felt that it was very empowering.
I just did some recent counseling about sex, and the word somebody used was I was yucking my own yum. A woman I know professionally came over to do a photo shoot, a boudoir photo shoot, but she brought some whips and stuff. And I was like, ooh, I was a child. And yet I was so proud of her for being empowered enough to say, I am who you know professionally, but I'm also this with my husband. And it was no big deal. And it helped me to realize that what I like is also no big deal with my husband. But why are we so judgmental or whatever we are, even about our own selves, about sex? Your whole soccer mom and stuff, I only heard stripper.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about sex that is so titillating?
I think it's two things. I think when it comes to ourselves, we're just conditioned. It's taboo, and then if you get to the extra taboo stuff, if you get into the kink stuff, it has this kind of dark undertone. I mean, on my podcast, I just interviewed a dominant and his sex life. And it was so interesting because their story was so different than you would expect it to. There's so much love there. And it's such a deep connect, but you wouldn't think that because all you think about is whips and chains. And is that part of it? Could be, but there's so much more.
Yeah.
Right. We don't know. And yet we feel really comfortable judging off the very little information that we're given.
Yeah.
When I post dance videos, they're just me dancing in my backyard or whatever. And there's tons of people who are like, oh, that brings me joy. And I know that there are people who are going, oh God, why is she doing that? And I think it's because they wouldn't feel comfortable doing it. Mm-hmm. So if they wouldn't feel comfortable doing it, it's like, well, why is she doing it?
Yeah.
And I think that there are people who aren't comfortable in their sexuality. And so when they see someone else who is comfortable in their sexuality, instead of saying, oh, well, good for them, or, not my thing, but it's easier to judge. I think also there are people who might want, who are interested in that, but feel for themselves it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, I really want to do that. I'd love to explore that, but I can't. So it's bad. And they must be bad because they can't let themselves believe that it could be okay.
Yeah.
Because they're not ready yet. I mean, there's so much that we're so trapped in this. And it's such a shame because really, when it comes to sex, if it's consensual, adults, and it's consensual, then go for it.
I think we're taught as kids, sex is bad. And we're taught as even young women, sex is bad. And then at some point, sex isn't bad. And so it's confusing. And we're supposed to be sexual with the men we love and that we should never have been sexual before you. Those kind of mixed messages.
We can't be sexual before, but we have to be really good and know what we're doing.
Very confusing.
And also, we can't be sexual for ourselves. It's this constant thing with women of mixed messages. I mean, people have been using, whether they're selling cars or cosmetics or perfume or jewelry, they've been using supermodels who are 15 years old and sexualizing them forever. It's okay to sexualize women if they're making money. Right. But the minute a woman decides that she wants to use her body, whether it's for OnlyFans or whether it's for whatever, well, then that's dirty. And then she's slutty.
Well, thank you so much. Such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of See Beneath Your Beautiful, hosted by Hara Allison. And thanks for your ratings and reviews. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Stay tuned.